She walked into the flight hangar with nothing but a folded paper and a quiet request to fly the Apache simulator just once. They laughed, suggesting she wanted a selfie in the cockpit. She said nothing, stepped back, and let them have their moment. But then an air marshal, just passing through, noticed the ink behind her ear, a tattoo most wouldn't recognize. But he did. The second he saw it, everything changed. The Arizona sun hit the tarmac at Falcon Mesa like a hammer on an anvil, sending waves of heat dancing off the concrete. Even in the morning, the air shimmered with bone-dry intensity that made steel too hot to touch and turned every breath into work. Shadows were precious, and smart people stayed indoors. Captain Ava Morgan wasn't most people. She walked through the chain-link gate with the quiet stride of someone who belonged nowhere and everywhere at once. No uniform, no visible rank, just desert boots that had seen real desert and cargo pants lived in. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, revealing a tan line where aviators usually Saturday. Everything about her was understated, except her deliberate, economical movements, like someone who'd learned wasted motion could be deadly. The gate guard barely glanced up from his clipboard, waving her through with bored efficiency. She nodded once and kept walking, her small duffel bag slung over one shoulder, paperwork folded neatly in her back pocket. Inside the operations tent, the air conditioning fought a losing battle against the desert heat. Two flight instructors lounged in folding chairs, one wearing aviators indoors like it was 1986, the other clutching a protein shake like liquid confidence. They were laughing about something on a tablet screen, probably a video of some cadet washing out spectacularly. "Help you?" the aviator guy asked, his tone carrying the boredom of someone who'd already decided she didn't belong here. Captain Ava Morgan presented her civilian access pass for Apache simulator time, unfolding the paperwork and placing it flat on the table. The slot was booked. Protein shake guy looked her over like a curiosity at a county fair. "You want to what now?" "Fly the Apache simulator," she repeated, voice level as a carpenter's square. The two men exchanged glances. Aviator guy scanned her paperwork with theatrical attention, then dropped it like it was contaminated. "Yeah, see. Here's the thing, sweetheart," he drawled. "We're running crew evaluations today. Birds not available for tourists. The authorization is signed by your base director," Ava said quietly. "Don't care if it's signed by the Pope," Protein Shake Guy chimed in. "Apache's not a carnival ride. Those birds eat people who don't know what they're doing." Ava didn't argue, didn't raise her voice, didn't flinch. She picked up her paperwork, folded it once, and stepped back toward a metal chair near the tent's edge, where she could see the flight line. "You can wait all you want," Aviator Guy called after her. Answers still no. She sat down, placed her bag at her feet, and folded her hands in her lap. From her seat, she could see the Apache simulator hangar shimmering in the distance, heat waves making it dance like a mirage. The instructors went back to their tablet, shaking their heads and chuckling. "Some people watch Top Gun once and think they're Maverick," one muttered. Ava closed her eyes, letting the sounds wash over her. Distant rotor thumps from practice birds, the hiss of hydraulics, the metallic ping of cooling metal sounds that had been the soundtrack to half her adult life, living in her dreams, both the good ones and those that woke her sweating. She'd been up since dawn, sitting on the edge of a motel bed that smelled of industrial disinfectant and old cigarettes, the kind of place that rented rooms by the week and didn't ask questions. Her gear bag sat open on a chair, contents organized with military precision. Clean clothes folded tight, toiletries in a clear bag, and at the bottom, wrapped in a faded bandana, a photograph she hadn't looked at in months. She'd pulled it out that morning, holding it to the weak light filtering through dusty Venetian blinds, 3 figures on a helipad somewhere in the sand, dust devils swirling in the background. Her in the middle, flight helmet tucked under her arm, flanked by her crew chief and co-pilot, all squinting against the sun, young enough to think they were invincible. The crew chief made it home, got out, started a family in Ohio, coaching Little League now, according to his Christmas cards. The co-pilot never made it past the 3rd deployment. An IED took his bird down in a valley, whose name she still couldn't say out loud. His son was graduating flight school soon, with his dad's eyes, his dad's stubborn streak, and no idea Captain Ava Morgan existed. She'd promised herself one last flight before his graduation, not for glory, not for closure, just to prove she could still touch the sky without falling apart. She folded the photo back into the bandana and zipped her bag. Time to keep a promise. Now, sitting in the shade of the operations tent, sweat beaded at the base of her neck where her hair was pulled back. The tattoo there was small, angular black ink faded to charcoal over the years. Most people never saw it. Most didn't need to. The instructor's conversation drifted to weekend plans and complaints about the coffee. Occasionally, one glanced her way, shaking his head like she was a problem that would solve itself. A young mechanic walked past, tool bag slung over her shoulder, grease under her fingernails. She looked at Ava with curious eyes, noting the stillness, the patience, the way someone could sit in the heat without fidgeting or checking a phone. "Ma'am, you okay out here?" Ava opened her eyes. "Just waiting." The girl nodded and kept walking, but looked back twice before disappearing into the hangar. Something about Ava's perfect stillness in the furnace heat reminded her of her grandfather. Old Marines had that same quality, waiting forever if they had to. Inside the briefing room, the morning's flight instructors were getting their second wind after initial simulator runs. The air conditioning hummed, fighting the desert heat pressing against every window and door. Folding chairs faced a whiteboard covered in call signs, flight times, and weather updates that hadn't changed. The two who'd turned Ava away held court near the coffee station, regaling anyone who'd listen with their tale of the wannabe pilot still outside. "I'm telling you, she's been out there just staring at the hangar like she's trying to will herself into the cockpit," Protein Shake Guy said, gesturing like describing a fish that got away. A cluster of cadets laughed, new ones, fresh from basic flight training, young enough to think everything was either hilarious or terrifying, with no middle ground. "What's her deal?" asked a cadet with a Texas drawl and enough confidence for 3 people. "Says she wants to fly the Apache sim," Aviator Guy replied, shaking his head. "Got some paperwork, says she's qualified, but come on, look at her civilian clothes, no patches, no presents. Probably flew drones from some air-conditioned trailer in Nevada and thinks that counts as combat experience." More laughter, the kind that comes easy when you're 22 and convinced you know everything. "Did you see her hands, though?" The female mechanic from earlier walked in, wrench still in her grip. "They're scarred up pretty good. Don't get hands like that from video games." "Probably worked construction," someone suggested. "Or maybe she fixes motorcycles." "Yeah, well, fixing motorcycles doesn't make you qualified to fly a $40 million weapons platform," Aviator Guy declared with the authority of someone who'd been doing the job for 6 months. Nobody noticed the man who'd entered through the back door of the briefing room. He moved with quiet authority, the way senior officers walk after years of being the one everyone looks to when things go sideways. Air Marshal Robert Keene was 57, flying military aircraft since before some of these instructors were born. He'd commanded squadrons in 3 conflicts, flown everything from Hueys to Blackhawks to birds that didn't officially exist. His uniform was pressed but not pristine, worn enough to show use. His face carried the weathered look of someone who'd spent serious time in serious places. He'd come to Falcon Mesa for a routine inspection, the kind of dog and pony show that kept bureaucrats happy and funding flowing. But what he heard in the briefing room wasn't routine. "I'm just saying," a cadet pontificated, "if you want to play pilot, get Microsoft Flight Simulator. Don't waste our time with Fantasy Camp." Keene stopped, turned toward the voices, listened. "She's probably some rich lady going through a midlife crisis," another added. "Wants to tell her book club she flew an Apache. Or maybe she's writing a blog," Protein Shake Guy suggested. "Military wife tries combat flying clicks for days." The laughter had an edge now, turning from amusement to meanness without anyone noticing. Keene had heard enough. He walked back outside, leaving the briefing room to its jokes and assumptions, sensing those jokes were about to age poorly. The heat hit him like an oven. Even after years in desert postings, the Arizona sun still took his breath away. He pulled his cap low and headed toward the operations tent, boots crunching on gravel. That's when he saw her, exactly where the instructors said she'd be, sitting in a metal chair at the edge of the tent's shade. Seeing her in person, Keene understood why the kids inside had gotten it so wrong. They saw her clothes, Her lack of visible rank, her civilian status, they didn't see her. She sat with perfect stillness, back straight but not rigid, hands folded but ready to move, breathing controlled, economical. She wasn't wilting in the heat or checking her phone, showing no restless energy. She was a study in controlled patience, the kind learned where moving at the wrong time could be fatal. Keene had seen that stillness before in snipers waiting for their shot, pilots preparing for night insertions behind enemy lines, soldiers who'd learned survival meant disappearing into yourself until the moment demanded action. As he got closer, she turned her head slightly, acknowledging his approach without breaking composure. That's when he saw it behind her left ear, where her pulled-back hair revealed her neck, a small, precise tattoo in black ink, faded to charcoal with age. It wasn't decorative or artistic, but functional, a mark for those who couldn't carry ID cards into certain places. Keene's breath caught. The design was unmistakable. 2 crossed rotors beneath a stylized dagger, no bigger than a quarter. Below it, numbers so small they were almost invisible. 160, the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers. But what made Keene's blood run cold was the additional mark below the numbers. A tiny arrow pointing downward, crossed by a single horizontal line. Tier 1, direct action. He'd seen that mark 3 times in his career, twice on posthumous award recommendations he'd signed, once in a classified briefing about operations that officially never happened. The woman before him wasn't some civilian playing dress-up. She was a ghost from the deepest shadows of military aviation, a pilot whose missions were redacted, whose existence was denied by 3 government agencies. "Ma'am," he said quietly. Ava looked up with green eyes holding depths he couldn't read. "Sir, I couldn't help but notice your ink. That's some very specific artwork." She didn't flinch, cover it, or deflect. "It island. Mind if I ask where you got it?" She studied his face, reading things in his posture the instructors had missed. Then she spoke 2 words. Hindu Kush. The Hindu Kush Mountains, Afghanistan, where Task Force 160 ran operations so classified they didn't exist in official records, where pilots flew missions that couldn't be acknowledged or celebrated. Keene felt something shift in his chest, respect, recognition, the realization he was looking at a legend he'd assumed was dead. "What's your call sign?" "Ghost Actual." The name hit like a physical blow. Ghost Actual, the pilot who'd flown the impossible insertion at Objective Red Sand, extracted a team from a Valley satellite imagery said was unreachable, disappeared from records after a mission too successful to acknowledge. Standing before him, sweating quietly in the Arizona heat, was the woman who'd redefined what was possible in rotary wing aviation, and his instructors had been laughing at her. Keene looked toward the operations tent where her paperwork was dismissed, then the briefing room where jokes were still flying. His jaw tightened. "Ma'am, you'll fly today." He turned and walked back to the briefing room, stride sharp and purposeful. Behind him, Ava remained seated, but her posture shifted. The waiting was over. Inside the briefing room, laughter died the moment Keene walked in. His expression was dark enough to change the weather, and everyone suddenly found their phones or notebooks fascinating. "Which one of you turned away the woman outside?" His voice carried quiet authority that made spines straighten. Aviator Guy raised his hand like a student, confessing to cheating. "That was me, sir, but she's not on the flight manifest, and we're running evaluations today." "Did you look at her paperwork?" "Yes, sir." "But did you look at her?" The instructor's mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish. "Sir, the woman sitting outside has more flight time in Apache aircraft than everyone in this room combined," Keene said, voice deadly quiet. "She's flown missions that don't exist, in places you can't pronounce, for reasons you don't have clearance to know." The room fell silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. "But more importantly," Keene continued, "she has something most of you will never earn, the right to be here." He turned to the flight operations chief, a master sergeant watching with growing alarm. "Get the simulator prepped. Full weapon systems, full navigation, full electronic warfare suite, no training wheels. Sir, the insurance waiver for civilian access." "She's not a civilian." Keene's eyes swept the room. "Captain Morgan is retired military. Her clearance level is higher than mine." Protein shake guy found his voice. Captain Morgan? She said exactly what she needed to say. Keen's stare could have cut glass. You assumed the rest. He walked to the door, paused, and looked back. Oh, and gentlemen, the next time a Night Stalker asks to fly your aircraft, the correct response is, "Yes, ma'am, right away, ma'am." Are we clear? A chorus of "Yes, sir" followed him out. Behind him, the briefing room erupted in whispered conversations and frantic Google searches, Night Stalkers, Ghost Actual, Hindu Kush operations. The pieces came together and nobody was laughing anymore. Outside, Keen walked to where Ava still Saturday. She looked up and he saw something different in her eyes. Not anticipation, but a shift from patience to readiness. "Simulator's yours," he said simply. "Full capabilities unlocked." Ava stood, shouldered her bag, and nodded. "Thank you, Marshal." As they walked to the hangar, Keen matched her pace, humbled to walk beside someone whose reputation existed in whispered conversations and redacted files, someone who'd flown into the impossible and brought everyone home. "Can I ask you something, Captain?" "Ava's fine." "Ava, why here? Why now? You could get sim time at any number of facilities with better equipment and less hassle." She was quiet so long he thought she wouldn't answer. "I made a promise to someone who can't keep it himself anymore." Keen nodded, understanding. In their line of work, ghosts accumulated. You carried them wherever you went, and sometimes keeping faith with the dead was the only thing that kept you sane. They reached the simulator hangar, and Keen pulled open the heavy door. Cool air rushed out, a relief from the furnace outside. Inside, the Apache flight simulator gleamed under fluorescent lights, its cockpit identical to the real thing. A small crowd had gathered word traveled fast on a military base, especially about legends. The female mechanic from earlier stood near the control booth, eyes wide with awe. Cadets found excuses to be nearby, their earlier jokes forgotten. Ava walked to the simulator without acknowledging the audience, conducting a quick visual inspection of the cockpit, checking systems with automatic efficiency. She climbed into the pilot's seat and began the startup sequence, hands moving across controls with muscle memory precision. The simulator screens came alive, displaying a training scenario, but Keen noticed the scenario wasn't standard. It had defaulted to Objective Red Sand, the mission that made Ghost Actual a legend and cost her co-pilot his life. Ava saw it too. Her hands paused for a moment over the controls, a flicker of pain and memory crossing her face, the weight of carrying ghosts. Then her training took over. She initialized the mission parameters and began her approach. What followed was like poetry written in rotor wash and hydraulic fluid. The simulated Apache lifted off with smooth grace, Ava's control inputs so subtle they were almost invisible, keeping the aircraft in perfect trim as she navigated virtual Afghan mountains. The audience watched in stunned silence as she flew a profile most had only heard in hushed tones, nap of the Earth flight through impassable terrain, insertion into a landing zone between cliff faces with margins measured in inches. The mission scenario threw everything at her: mechanical failures, weather, enemy fire, communications jamming. She handled each with calm competence, as if she'd faced them all before in places where simulation meant the difference between coming home and being listed as missing. When the scenario ended, the screens faded to black and the simulator powered down. Ava removed her helmet and climbed out with the same quiet efficiency she'd shown climbing in. The hangar was silent. Then someone started clapping slowly at first, then with growing enthusiasm as others joined. It wasn't applause for a good performance, but recognition of mastery most couldn't attempt. Ava didn't acknowledge it. She picked up her bag and walked toward the door, her obligation fulfilled, her promise kept. Marshal Keen intercepted her at the exit. For a moment, they stood facing each other, two professionals who understood the weight of service and sacrifice. "It was an honor," he said simply. Ava nodded and walked out into the Arizona heat. Behind her, the crowd dispersed, but the conversations would continue for hours, years maybe. The female mechanic approached Keen as he watched Ava disappear across the tarmac. "Sir, was she really?" "She was," Keen confirmed. "The best of the best, the kind they don't make anymore." "Why did she leave?" Keen watched the heat waves dance off the concrete. "Because sometimes the mission ends, but the war doesn't, and sometimes the only way to honor the dead is to keep living. The mechanic nodded, not fully comprehending but sensing the weight. Understanding came with time, experience, and losses that accumulated like scar tissue. As Ava's figure vanished, Keen thought about ghosts, the ones she carried, the ones he carried, the ones that kept them honest and committed to something larger. That's what separated real warriors from pretenders, not uniforms or rank, but the willingness to carry responsibility's weight, especially after the mission was over. By evening, word had spread through the base. Every pilot, crew chief, and cadet within 50 miles had heard some version of the story. The woman dismissed as a wannabe was ghost actual. The pilot who'd flown the impossible mission disappeared into classified history and emerged as a quiet civilian, asking politely for simulator time. In the chow hall, conversation stopped when she walked in, not because people stared, but because they understood they were in the presence of someone whose service couldn't be quantified. Ava bought a bottle of water and a sandwich, ate in silence at a corner table, and left without fanfare, the way she did everything. Later, as the sun painted the mountains purple and gold, she stood beside a dusty pickup truck that had seen better decades, bag slung over her shoulder, promise fulfilled. The young mechanic approached hesitantly, unsure if she had the right to speak to someone whose exploits existed in whispered stories and redacted reports. "Ma'am," she said quietly. "Thank you." Ava looked at her, really looked, and saw something familiar. Hunger, determination, the certainty the sky was where she belonged, no matter what anyone thought. "What's your name?" "Sarah Chen, ma'am. I'm working on my pilot certification, hoping to get into flight school next year." Ava nodded, understanding. "They're going to tell you it's too hard, that the standards are too high, that you don't have what it takes." Sarah's eyes widened. "How do you?" "Because they told me the same thing." Ava's voice was quiet but firm. "The difference is whether you believe them or believe yourself." She reached into her bag and pulled out something small wrapped in faded cloth. Unwrapping it revealed a pair of aviator wings, not standard issue, worn smooth by years of handling, edges softened by time and touch. These belonged to someone who believed in the sky more than he believed in the people who said he didn't belong there, Ava said. He never lived to pin them on his uniform, but he earned them just the same. She held out the wings. "Take care of them, and when someone tells you you can't fly, remember the sky doesn't care about their opinions." Sarah's hands trembled as she accepted the wings. She looked up to say thank you, but Ava was already walking toward her truck, her silhouette disappearing into the dusk as the pickup's taillights faded. Sarah stood holding the wings, thinking about promises, service, and the weight of carrying someone else's dreams until you could make them your own. Behind her, the base settled into its evening rhythm, but something had changed not just because a legend had walked among them, but because she'd reminded them what they were all doing there. Learning to fly wasn't about aircraft, technology, or missions. It was about keeping faith with those who'd flown before and those who'd fly after, and the endless human need to touch the sky, despite voices saying it couldn't be done. In the distance, a training Apache lifted off for a night exercise, its rotors thumping steadily against the desert air. Sarah watched it climb toward the stars, feeling something shift in her chest, purpose, direction, the certainty she belonged up there, no matter what anyone thought. The sky was waiting. It always had been. And now she knew the only permission she needed was her own. Captain Ava Morgan's story, the unassuming pilot dismissed as a wannabe, only to reveal herself as the legendary Ghost Actual, teaches us a profound lesson about the power of inner resolve and the danger of judging others by appearances. Laughed at for requesting Apache simulator time, Ava's quiet confidence and unseen scars marked by a Night Stalker's tattoo spoke louder than the mockery of those who underestimated her. Her mastery in the simulator, navigating the impossible objective Red Sand mission, wasn't just skill, it was a testament to years of sacrifice, loss, and unyielding dedication to her craft. This story reminds us that true strength often lies in those who don't flaunt their credentials but prove their worth through actions. Ava carried the weight of her fallen pilot's memory, flying not for glory but to honor a promise, a reminder to live with purpose, even when the world doubts you. In our lives, we must look beyond surface judgments recognizing that the quiet ones, the overlooked, may carry extraordinary depth. Ava's journey urges us to trust our own capabilities, to persevere despite skepticism, and to honor those who believed in us by proving them right. Have you ever witnessed someone's quiet competence silence the doubters? Share your stories in the comments. We want to hear about the unsung heroes you've seen rise. If Ava's tale of resilience and hidden strength moved you, hit that subscribe button and join our community for more stories of courage that redefine what's possible. Let's celebrate those who soar above judgment and inspire us all.